Why did the LA Unified School District waste almost $500 million? It was supposed to be a new concept in school construction, both in design and in financing. They began building. Then they began tearing it down.
Belmont itself was originally conceived to be a multi-use, I won't say joint-use facility. It was going to have a grocery store at the bottom. It was going to have housing. It was going to have quite a number of components that really weren't permitted by law at the time in the state of California.
There was to be a mixed-use element. The primary purpose of the site is as a school and has to be as a school under California law.
The Belmont project was a victim of union politics, environmental politics, and electoral politics.
The LA Unified School District put forward legislation which would allow for design build, for the kind of project that which wasn't allowed in state law. That legislation unfortunately didn't pass, yet the school district still proceeded with that process.
Belmont High School project, the Belmont Learning Center, was probably the worst public works disaster perhaps in the history of the country, at least in terms of school building. A lot went wrong over there.
And what we found was enormous waste, fraud, and abuse. It was a tragedy because they knew, they being the school district and the people developing the property, at all times about the environmental hazards. This school was being built on an old oil field, which is not...
and we noticed a tremendous amount of puddles on site where there were gases bubbling up through the water ponds, and in some cases you could even smell the odor of I call rotten eggs, which is probably from hydrogen sulfide.
Is it dangerous?
It's very dangerous. It's a poison and it's deadly.
The question is, do you take the mitigation steps? Do you spend the money before you build the buildings to capture the gas and vent it so it's safe?
When you have a guaranteed maximum price, and as the project progresses and costs, big costs like environmental cleanup actually come up, there isn't any way to compensate for that. The developer, therefore, doesn't want to pay out the extra money to do the cleanup, do what's necessary to actually build the site, because they're at a guaranteed maximum price.
The mitigation that permits a school to be built in the site is not costly. It has unfortunately been politicized to such a degree that what has been designed over the last few years for Belmont is completely unnecessary. But to assuage the fear factor and the hysteria that surrounded Belmont, it became necessary.
Part of the problem in the state is that school districts are almost a separate government.
The school districts would self-report. They'd call the Department of Education and they'd sign a statement that they believe that this is a safe site, and that's all they needed.
Oh.
And so there was no real oversight. The district itself was responsible for doing the testing and making sure that it was a safe site. In some cases we found that that information was falsified. In other cases, it just wasn't done.
We had slipshod legal work. We had very poor accounting standards. We had 3 people reviewing bills, and they approved a bill for concrete for a floor when there's dirt there today. Now, how is that possible?
Steve Cooley asked me to head the task force. I had 4 lawyers, 10 investigators, 4 law clerks, and 2 secretaries. I spent approximately $1.5 million taxpayers' funds to investigate the $175 million fraud known as the Belmont Learning Complex.
And tell us, what happened as a result of spending $1.5 million? What was the outcome of this investigation?
Nothing. The only thing that occurred was after I was removed as head of the Belmont Task Force is that Steve Cooley issued a whitewash report of what really had occurred regarding the investigation pertaining to the $175 million fraud.
Some people suggested, this is a terrible project, let's indict somebody. How about, let's see if there's any evidence of a law being broken within the statute of limitations. And some of the people say indict someone, they don't want to name who, they don't want to say what charge. And if any of your previous guests, the Inspector General or Mr. Patchett, are willing to come out with the names and the charge they would have filed, I'd be very interested. They were both given ample opportunity to do so.
Well, it was my understanding that Mr. Patchett, as head of the ad hoc Belmont
That
Task
Mr.
Force,
Patchett-
did recommend indictment and grand jury.
Well, no, he didn't.
He did not.
He did not. The grand jury was used to obtain evidence, and he did not come up with any plausible theory of criminal liability that withstood any sort of scrutiny.
That the Inspector General and Mr. Patchett did not name names, and they didn't ask for indictments. Do you know that to be a factual statement?
Those are simply false statements. I don't know why Mr. Cooley would want to misrepresent the record.
If the school is built and it still has the presence of hydrogen sulfide, is that a violation of state law?
Yes, it's a violation of state and federal law.
We need to overcome the legacy of Belmont. I agree with you. It's not a good story. We're going to turn that campus, which sits there today, 33 acres, into a community-serving park, 12 acres, and a new high school on the remaining 20 or so acres. And that project is approved by the board. It's in design right now. It'll start construction in probably a year and a half. And it will be a great campus, a smaller campus than that envisioned by the first concept. It'll have a new name, Vista Hermosa. The days of Belmont are gone. And it'll be a safe, comfortable, excellent place for our kids to go to school in an area of the city that is in desperate need of those seats.
Most of the large business schools use case studies as being the most instructive way of teaching people what not to do or what to do. And I think Belmont has to be, given its size, its impact on a community, one of the second largest city in the United States, is a perfect case study. And the richness of the detail that you bring to it is something that the professors at the School of Government at Harvard and the like, I think, would be very interested in using as source material, because you materially advance that process by having that much research behind them. And all these case studies are based on extensive interviews with people, et cetera, which you've already achieved. So I think your work could form a body for somebody like a Harvard or Wharton or others that regularly publish case studies.
Well, Leslie, in my role as the chairman of the California Center at the Milken Institute, I've seen a lot of material in relationship to public policy issues regarding state finances, pensions, the county finances, the school district finances. I believe that the Belmont Learning Center series that was done by Full Disclosure would be an extremely useful and valuable tool for current practitioners in the area of public policy and students of public policy around the world.
The most valuable part of the Full Disclosure series to me is the individual interviews. That you had the ability to go out and contact these people, and you can hear them in their own words express their story. And the series is long enough. It's not the minute and a half capsule that you get fed at prime time. It is an open-ended discussion that is extended over many years and many tapes that gives you just a wealth of information.
The Full Disclosure series on the Belmont Learning Center would be one of the most in-depth studies that I've ever seen done, especially in the area of public policy, on a project which ran amok. And the value of that in terms of as a teaching tool and for the awareness of the general populace is unmeasurable in terms of the opportunity that it presents for people both to evaluate what's gone on here and to develop policies in the future that can avoid it.